Do you agree that Quebec should become sovereign? Those were the first 8 words of the English language question for voters in that province in 1995. Millions of Quebecers cast their ballots in a referendum, and by the slimmest of margins, they rejected the idea of separation. Now, a new book has startling details about what was happening behind the scenes. Terence McKenna has more about what was going on leading up to the fateful vote and the morning after. A story so many of us were following so closely at the time. The country's future lies in the hands of one province tonight. 5 million Quebecers are choosing between yes and no, between Quebec and Canada.
October 30th, 1995 was a night of maximum tension. When the first results came in, the sovereignist side had a wide lead. It looked as if Parti Québécois leader Jacques Parizeau was about to realize his lifelong dream of separating Quebec from Canada. For Prime Minister Jean Chrétien, it looked as if the country was about to go over a cliff, and he had no real plan of what would happen next.
C'est l'option du non qui remportera ce référendum.
In the end, the Federalist side squeaked by in an extremely tight victory. One of the most fascinating and enduring questions of Canadian history is, what would have happened if the tight vote had gone the other way?
The society definitely plays a really huge part on guiding the referendum. You know, Quebec is actually the second most populous province in Canada, right after Ontario, and that means that Quebec is actually a very essential and a very integral part of Canada. So, saying that it's just like when you take a look at that, then you'll think of how Scotland was trying to be independent from the United Kingdom just months earlier, and I feel like saying that the society has a big part means that the referendum is actually a manifestation of what the society wants, right? But then again, I feel like the problem, the notion of sovereignty and independence in Quebec is a little bit politicized and a little bit dramatized by some interested parties, and knowing that I don't feel like based on the limited knowledge I have on the topic, I would say that I'm not really in favor of Quebec being independent or being sovereign. But if that's what the people want, then I think that's what should happen.
Inside the vehicles, ages ranged from 8 weeks to 80 years old. The message was the same.
I hope that the people in Quebec understand that the rest of English Canada cares very much about them continuing to be part of Canada.
We don't want to break up a great country like this.
I'm hoping that we'll make a difference, that they'll realize that the rest of Canada actually does want them to stay.
I served with 8.5 years in the military with a lot of French-speaking Canadians, and would be ashamed to lose them.
I'm a Montreal-born myself, and I hope that it'll convince some people.
As we approached Montreal, some residents lining the street wept with emotion as the cavalcade rolled into the city. The rally itself was incredible, an outpouring of emotion.
The cultural approach could be used as to identifying the conflict in the Quebec and Canadian. So we can use in identifying it by the value of the language and the societal stature language. Okay, as we all know about the conflict between Quebecian and the north side of Quebecian referendum, was how is matter to belonging with the other, just like the English-spoken Canadian and the French-spoken Canadian in Quebec. We just cannot look the Indonesian as an example. we have a different language. We have a lot of different language. There's a lot of sorts of problem. But there's something we have as Indonesian, that it is the sense of belonging by an Indonesian and the Bhinneka Tunggal Ika as a basic moral value of Indonesia.
What we see here from the socio-cultural side, this kind of Quebec problem is the tangible conflict, which is from the impact of the language differences. Because of that language differences, they are feel that they are not belong to the Canadian people, and this kind of problem called secessionist, which is the Quebec people want to withdraw from the Canadian government. Why this kind of problem happen? This kind of problem happen because the language differences, which is the Quebecois people are the francophone or the French-speaking community, and the majority of the Canadian people was the English-speaking community. Although the Canadian government are very open-minded to want to keep the Quebec as their part of their country, but the Quebecois people, they don't want to mix up with the Canadian government. So that's make the problem between the Quebecois people and the Canadian people.
I love this country, and I don't think it would be a country without Quebec. The people will come to their senses. This is Canada. We belong together, 100%.
We just hate to see them gone. We think they're part of our country, part of Canada.
Well, they're not gone yet. What concessions are you willing to give to keep them?
Well, let's talk. Let's talk it over. Let's not just decide something unilaterally.
My wife is from Quebec, and so are my in-laws, so I come up here to persuade them to vote no.
You want to see Quebec stay in Canada?
Most definitely, and Quebec is distinct, and they should be distinct in Canada.
How do you feel about the situation here?
It's sad. I hope that it doesn't go through.
Are you afraid?
Yes, afraid for my children. I want my children to have what I had when I grew up.
You grew up where?
In Peterborough.
So, aside from the cultural and historical backgrounds we mentioned, we actually found out some paradox from both sides. The first thing is that if Quebec was really independent by 2013, Quebec will actually be the 29th biggest economy in the world, and that is just behind South Africa. And the second one is that if Quebec was independent, Quebec will actually be the 99th most populous country, just behind Tajikistan. And the last one I found out is that if only Quebec was independent, Quebec will be the 20th largest country in the world, and that is just behind Mongolia. So the question is now become, is Canada just trying to protect its sovereignty towards the country over Quebec, or is it just Quebec trying to pursue its national interest towards the world?
There are significant drivers keeping Quebec from taking this drastic step, despite the separatist slogans of the Marois campaign. Quite simply, separation from Canada could be very costly. Quebec City and Ottawa would have to agree on a number of sensitive issues, including the status of Quebecers living in the rest of Canada or those working for the Canadian government. Quebec could also be required to pay a portion of Canada's national debt. And finally, the status of Canadian military personnel and assets in Quebec would pose a serious security conundrum for both the emergent Quebec and Canada. In addition to this host of logistical problems, Quebec would also stand to lose billions of dollars of redistributed tax income from Ottawa. Quite possibly as a result of rising awareness of these issues, the majority of Quebecers do not support the sovereignty movement. Despite having integrated the polarizing issue of separatism into the campaign, Parti Québécois only managed to secure leadership with 32% of the provincial vote, demonstrating the fractured nature of Quebec politics. However, although separation from Canada may not be an immediate or achievable goal, the Parti Québécois will be able to use the issue and the potential for resultant tension with the rest of the country to secure political gains for Quebec in Ottawa.
It's not about taking a side.
It's about giving enough tolerance.
So let us know.
What do you say?
To live in
And pluralism.